Welcome everyone to CivilNet. Today we're joined by Stefan Meister, head of the Center for Order and Governance in Eastern Europe, Russia, and Central Asia at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Dr. Meister, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Let's start with the United Nations Security Council yesterday, which held emergency talks at France's request after Azerbaijan's latest strikes on Nagorno-Karabakh. The European Union, France, Germany, and United States all condemned Azerbaijan's strikes and called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. Russia, the only power with boots on the ground in the region, was notably softer on Azerbaijan. Was any of this surprising to you? What did you make of yesterday's talks?
To be honest, it was not a surprise to me. I think France and Germany were quite critical about what happens now in Karabakh and the whole situation. But I think I'm still missing a EU statement, which is very clear, and I think it's blocked by Hungary. So I think that's for me more the issue. So I think it was good that the German foreign minister and also the French representative were really speaking clear words. But I also see that Russia has now different interests. It needs the North-South corridor. It needs more cooperation with Azerbaijan and Turkey. So I think it has changed in a way the sides, you can say. And that's why it's much more softer. Yeah, I think without Russian confirmation, there would not have been an attack. So I see here really Russia has its own interest and is not playing the role it normally or traditionally, at least in the discourse, is playing it in the region and with regard to Armenia.
Absolutely. And I want to cite a line from Armenia's foreign minister who was present at the talks. So this is from Ararat Mirzoyan. He said, "We have been raising the alarm for a long time now. The international community refused to take it seriously. This council has failed to react adequately." Do you agree?
Yeah, we know that the UN Security Council is blocked on most of the key issues globally. It does not play anymore the role which it should play as a multilateral body. And I think especially what happens now in the South Caucasus and with regard to Karabakh shows that multilateralism is more or less dead. Yeah, it's really the power of force. And democratic countries are not capable or not willing to act. I'm really deeply frustrated also personally about lip services, but in the end, no action from the Western side. With all the problems this conflict has, yeah, and its own history from both sides. But I think it's unacceptable what happens there. And it's a very negative precedent, and neither UN Security Council nor the EU is able to act and to stop this violence and killing of people.
Yes, absolutely. And to your point about the UN Security Council being effectively blocked at this point, let's move on to the European Union, which has taken on an increasingly active role in the conflict since the 2020 war. Yesterday, the European Commission said it would mobilize €500,000 in humanitarian assistance for the region. At this point, given the events, do you see the EU's role purely in humanitarian terms, or do you still see a political mediating role for the European Union? After all, Azerbaijan's foreign ministry just yesterday accused the EU of taking a biased pro-Armenian stance in the region.
No, I think we see that diplomacy has failed. And now it's the power of force, as I said. So I think it's also a kind of bankruptcy of EU and also US diplomacy, what we have seen now. I think it's a very bad precedent, and I hope for more engagement of the EU. I think it needs really peacekeeping forces. It needs a kind of sanction system or mechanism, and it's great that there are EU monitoring mission on the Armenian border, yeah.
Yes.
And they might top up also this monitoring mission. I think it's now discussed. But as you see, it does not prevent anything. I think Azerbaijan has planned this, has prepared it, and now it's implementing what it wanted to do. And I don't see a bigger role of the EU, to be honest, even if I wish it would so, than just helping with humanitarian help. And that's fine, that's great, but that's also very bitter, yeah, in a way, and not enough.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up the EU monitors on the border, because I wanted to ask about that later. Before I do, we are here in Yerevan, we are here on the ground. You are in Europe. So I'm wondering what you can tell us from conversations you've had with stakeholders, with the relevant people in the European Union, in Germany, on this. Is there anything you can tell us? You mentioned, you know, the idea of increasing humanitarian involvement. You know, what else can you say?
Yes, I have been with all key stakeholders in contact in Berlin and also in the EU, also just warning that it's getting worse, and there might be more attacks also on Armenia. Their reaction is at the moment that they might top up really the monitoring mission. I think that's at least discussed. There are very close communication with the International Red Cross. There will be also a top up of humanitarian support, because there's an expectation that there will be a huge amount of people, of refugees coming into Armenia, and that will be also quite a challenge for the country. So I think these are the main focuses at the moment from the European Union and also the German side. I don't see anything else. I think if there will be an attack, I just want to add this, if there will be an attack on the south of Armenia to create this so-called corridor, I think there will be much more harsh reactions from the EU. There are also sanctions discussed in this context, but that's still in preparation. Yeah. So, but I think at the moment it's mainly humanitarian help which is discussed.
I see. And so let's talk about the European Union mission in Armenia as well. Those are the unarmed civilian monitors on the Armenian side of the border with Azerbaijan. After this week's strikes in Nagorno-Karabakh, the observers said they would reinforce patrols. You mentioned discussions ongoing in the European Union at the moment on propping up those monitors. More concretely, what else can you tell us? I understand that these are you know, behind the scenes negotiations, but is there anything else you can add here?
No, I don't have anything confirmed. I just heard that they want to increase the numbers. They want to increase also the presence on the border, just to deter in a way, also maybe possible more attacks and bring more transparency into it. But where the negotiations are, and yeah, I have no information about this.
I see. Thank you. And let's talk about the United States' role in all of this as well. What have you seen from the European side about U.S. involvement? How closely are the U.S. and the European Union working together on this? What else can you add there?
You know, there are these two parallel tracks beside a Russia track on the negotiations. And what I understand from the US colleagues, I have been in Washington in May the last time, also talked with the key people on the negotiations. They told me we are mainly supportive for the EU format. So they don't see themselves in the lead, but they see the EU as the main negotiator, and they support with their tracks the negotiations which are going on with the EU. I think the US is maybe more important in putting Ankara as Turkey as a NATO member, and also Baku under pressure if they're going too far. So I think the calls from Washington might have a stronger impact than the calls from Brussels. Yeah. So I think that might be very important also in stopping some kind of escalation. And I think here the US is playing an important role.
Well, speaking of outside powers, lastly, let's talk about Russia. We had talked about Russia earlier and their, let's say, non-response to the strikes, their statements at the United Nations Security Council. Again, I think that your perspective is really interesting from a EU perspective because, as I said, we are here on the ground in Yerevan, so we have a different perspective on it. How does the EU see Russia's role here, especially given ongoing events in Ukraine? I mean, is there, in your view, any possibility for any sort of collaboration with Russia to resolve the situation, or is that out of the question at this point?
No, I think it's the problem is everything now in this region and globally is becoming becoming hostage of the West-Russia conflict. So I think there is such a damaged and toxic relations between Russia and the EU and also other Western countries or institutions that I don't see any kind of cooperation, also not from the Russian side. Russia sees the EU as a competitor. They don't like if the EU is active or the US is active in this region. So I think there is no interest from the Russian side to make any kind of compromises. And they see rather Pashinyan, Prime Minister Pashinyan, as a person who wants to cooperate with the West, the Europeans and the US, and now needs to be punished also for this. So I think I don't see that there is an environment or there is an atmosphere where both coming together and help to solve this conflict, or at least stop the catastrophe which is just going on. I think there are rather bad news on this side, from my opinion.
And Dr. Meister, before we let you go, anything else you'd like to add? Anything that we didn't touch on yet that you think is important here?
No, I think this is really a dangerous precedent which is set now, which really undermines the credibility also of democratic countries and the kind of peaceful conflict mediation. And I think this is not enough understood in Europe. I think it has not enough attention how dangerous this conflict is, also setting authoritarian ways of solving conflict with force. And I think that needs to be repeated all the time, and really we need to rethink also on this conflict and on this way how authoritarian states try to force with power their interests, like Russia is doing in Ukraine and Azerbaijan now doing the same.
Well, Dr. Meister, thank you again very much for your time. It's a lot for us to think about and digest. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.